Well, it looks like everything is fine in Europe from the outside. No recession, no gas rationing, no power cuts, nothing. But from the inside, it is a simmering volcano. In reality, Europe is racing against time. It is sleepwalking into a massive debt trap. Experts say the next winter is going to be the deadly for many Europeans. The Russian energy war is taking a massive toll upon European economies. Around 1 trillion euros have already been lost. Rich European nations like Germany and France are rushing to insulate themselves from the upcoming economic shock, but smaller nations have been left to fend for themselves. Hi and welcome, you're watching Outright. We tell you the right side of the story. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for such outright videos. I'm starting this video with a famous quote. Life is not merely being alive, but being well. But that is not the case with Europe. It is fighting hard for its existence. It is fighting for energy. This is an era of artificial peace in the continent. Nothing is fine, but an impression, a fake impression, is being created to hide the ugly truth. Well, many people noted that Europe has finally found an energy solution for itself. It weathered the winters with ease. Gas storage is almost 70% full even without Russian imports. LNG imports in Europe jumped by 60% last year. Europe was able to replace Russian supplies with those from the US, Qatar, and Africa. Inflation was high, but many governments rolled out massive subsidy schemes to insulate their people and industries. Germany alone has a plan to dish out subsidies worth $200 billion. Many people have called it the German defense shield against inflation. As a result, Europe will avoid a recession this fiscal year. Its industries are in good shape. But here is a fundamental question. For how long can this model work? Because this model is drilling a huge hole in the EU's pocket and pushing the continent into a debt trap. See this report now. Europe has spent a staggering 800 billion euros just to insulate its economy from inflation. The worst of all is UK's condition. UK is slated to hit recession this year, and the country has to spend more than 100 billion euros extra to control inflation. EU is faring in troubled waters too. Firstly, Brussels took a joint debt of over 750 billion euros to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, and now they have spent over 800 billion euros just on energy premiums. That is a massive amount of debt, and experts have already sounded warning bells. Experts say the dynamic needs to change as states are running out of fiscal space to maintain such broad funding. They are urging governments to rein in the spending on fossil fuel aid and subsidies and instead focus on green sectors to wean the EU off imported fuel altogether. All in all, if you see in practical and feasible terms, the EU is yet to find any replacement for cheap Russian energy. The US, who loves to call itself an iron brother of EU, has made the most out of the energy crisis in Europe. See this report. The US tankers carrying LNG for Europe were seen idling off European shores in November last year. They wanted to create an artificial gas shortage in Europe and then sell the same gas at premium prices. On the other hand, the Biden administration passed the Inflation Reduction Act in US, which aimed at attracting businesses from the EU by dangling benefits such as subsidies and tax reliefs.
$738 billion. That is the massive size of the Inflation Reduction Act. With it, the Biden administration in the United States wants to, among other things, boost the production of electric cars and batteries. Now, Brussels says those benefits for US car makers put their European competitors at an unfair disadvantage.
The American Inflation Reduction Act is a matter of concern, not only for France and Germany, but also for all European countries. So we need to work on the adequate European responses to this American Inflation Reduction Act, which might jeopardize the level playing field between our two continents.
EU is certainly not happy with how the US has reacted to the crises in Europe. What is putting more economic burden on European economies is the fact that it has to import Russian oil via third nations with an added premium. Last month, the UK media reported that energy buyers supplying the UK, including BP and Shell, have increased their imports from Indian private crude oil refiners. Those Indian refiners are importing crude oil from Russia only. That is a major loophole. India and Russia are making the most out of it, and the EU is simply helpless. And as this economic mess gets even bigger with each passing day, it is sure to pit rich EU countries against the poor ones. Tensions between Germany and smaller EU states have already emerged. Germany is sneakily pushing for revamping EU's subsidy rules. Germany wants to provide heavy subsidies to its companies and to its people, which other EU member states are opposing. Italy, France, the EU all have pointed their cannons at Germany. Smaller EU countries are demanding to establish a joint EU fund to support EU companies collectively. However, Germany has so far fundamentally opposed such an option. According to plans by the German Economy Ministry, Berlin is highly skeptical of financing the response on the European level. Instead, it is insisting that funding should be raised primarily nationally. And due to all these predicaments, such as rising debt, more infightings, tensions with Russia, a trade war with US, subsidy war with US and China, the upcoming winters will spell doom for the EU's policymakers. EU will get no supplies from Russia. Even China won't offer help since it would be needing the gas to boost its own economic recovery. And if Asian demand rebounds, the competition between Europe and Asia for LNG will get even harder, which could result in higher prices than we see now. And due to the fiscal burden, EU won't be able to keep buying LNG at insane prices. International Energy Agency Executive Director Fatih Birol also warned recently, "Prepare yourself for next winter. Next winter might be much more difficult than the winter we are experiencing now." Now you might ask, what is the way out of this great artificial mess? Well, that is right in front of the EU's eyes. It just does not want to see it. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel once said, "Russia is the EU's neighbor and a natural economic partner." The EU must accept the fact that there is simply no replacement for cheap Russian gas. It must mend its ties with Russia as soon as possible and reinstate the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. Those are not just the gas pipelines but lifelines for European economies. The choice is simple for the EU nations. Either they can prolong the war in Ukraine and worsen their economic woes, or they can simply strike a logical and widely acceptable peace deal with Russia and save their own ass.